John, I loved reading your book, On Purpose with Purpose. And I just appreciate this book because even in the title, it says, not just to be on purpose, but use purpose. What are the actions behind what you really want to do? Know where you want to go, but then get there.
Yeah.
I feel like that's really kind of the theme of the book. It's not just these platitudes and kind of just talking about in general, but can you share just a little bit about what the book is about?
The entire book was about my journey after the accident that we've talked a lot about, to not only connect to my purpose, but then how do we, when we understand and start to get some clarity on our purpose, how do we actually move that into action? How do we move that into actually creating extraordinary marriage, extraordinary relationship with my kids? How do I make a difference and an impact out in the world? How do I actually build something in partnership with the Lord that I'm just passionate and excited about? So it's about having a purpose, on purpose, and then moving it into action with purpose. And it's how, not only what to do to get there, but how to do that in your life.
Yeah, I love the book because it's actually more kind of a workbook in a way. I mean, you have the pausings and you have, some space in there where you can write your thoughts down and you can really ruminate on it. And I feel like too, and just encouraging you as a man, sometimes we read books and we're like, we just read it through and we're like, that was nice, but really to take time, even kind of, I can even see this living alongside of like a journaling time or, read a little piece of the book and then get into it and, maybe write a little something to yourself. And then maybe in a year, as kind of as a watermark to see, how well did I really implement this? So I feel like this is a good book, even not just to read once and put down, but really to keep as kind of a part of your journaling process and just, to keep you on track, keep you accountable.
Well, like what I said, I didn't want it to be another interesting book that you just read and put down.
And it is interesting. I will say that, like all your
totally interesting.
Your stories of all your
I have a lot of stories.
Flight stories were incredible.
Incredible. Well, I asked Horst Schultz. I got to know Horst Schultz, who's the founder and CEO of Ritz-Carlton. He's 81, and he didn't want to write the foreword. And he sends me a note and goes, "John, I'm mad at you." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Well, I started reading your book, and then I had to work your book." He goes, "I found out stuff about myself I never knew. Like, this is amazing. Yes, I'm going to write your foreword."
That is so great.
And that was, that was so affirming to me because I wanted to make this something that people actually that help change them and move them forward.
Well, you mentioned something too, just in the age of that gentleman, is that I really feel like this is a multi-generational book too. It's not just for an older generation. It's not just for a young generation. I think this can even be great for like a high school student and a person that's really considering maybe even like just coming into high school and trying to figure out grades and what you're going to do and kind of deciding things for your life, because you talk about something here called limited beliefs. And I wanted you to share a little bit about that. I know you spend maybe 30 or 40, maybe about 30 pages on just what is a limiting belief, and just really talk about what that is and just real quick kind of summarize that in the book.
If you think about everything that we've gone through in our life, it's been formed by our experiences, what has been said to us, what we think other people think about us, right? That look that we get. Maybe somebody told you could never lead a team. All this stuff comes in, and here's the challenge is, there's things that every single one of us have let in that are counter to our identity in Christ, and they are lies that we've accepted about us as truth. And all the enemy has to do to just completely negate our impact in the kingdom is just get us to doubt who we are and then move us away this much from the works that were prepared for us to do, and they win. It doesn't take a lot.
Right.
So how do we clear all that up and then step into who we really are, and then all of a sudden the path just opens up.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned a 10 by 10 equation, and you are an engineer as well. So when you told me that, and I knew that I think from reading the book in the earlier, but we had mentioned we were just talking now, and it was funny because I totally got now how your brain worked to be able to have this graph. You had an X and Y graph, but share a little bit about the 10 and 10.
Yeah, so a little bit about the 10 and 10. I started doing this whole inventory. I was on this quest to not only understand better who God was, but who He made me to be. So I started digging into my passions, my core values. What are my strengths? What are my gifts? What are my beliefs? I'm like, okay, how do I put all this together so that I can, versus an interesting exercise, to actually something that helps me move into, like in John 10:10, right? Christ gave us to give us life, to live it to the full. I'm like, I wasn't even close.
John 10:10, huh?
John 10:10. So what I did is I graphed one axis, which was passions, and the other one was our strengths, gifts, and talents. And it's interesting because I get to work with leaders all over the world now. And I asked this question before we do a workshop, like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being fully alive, can't wait to wake up in the morning, 1 being you're barely hanging on, people self-rate themselves typically around 7, 8, and a lot of 9s. When we go through this exercise to actually do it, and you guys can see the whole thing in the book, I was at a 2 when I rated this. No wonder I was at a place before my accident happened where I was just miserable. I call it smoldering discontent. Most people, when we go through this exercise, are 3 to 5. And here's the thing. What if you could just figure out what it looks like to just do a +1?
Yeah.
What if I could just go from a 2 to a 3? All of a sudden, things get better. I start really believing in hope. I start saying, you know what, this is kind of fun. It's like I've lost 40 pounds this year, right? You lose that first 10 pounds, you're like, you know what? Maybe I could lose 10 more.
Right.
Right? Maybe I could lose 10 more.
10 more is possible.
10 more is possible, right? I got 10 more to go, and I'm excited about it, but that's the process.
So, and I'm just going to pull a couple of the things out of here. So, and I know you mentioned when we did your interview, you were talking about kind of the pause in life, when you had your accident. So, and just talk about the importance of evaluating who you are and kind of building I guess it's better word is maybe a baseline for who you are so that you can evaluate who you are to be able to move forward. Again, we're kind of working backwards from the limiting beliefs, but why is that important to understand who you and where you are as a base to be able to move forward in life and grow?
When I was going through, coming out of my accident, just trying to figure this out, I went through Halftime. If anybody's ever read the book Halftime, Going from Success to Significance, well, their head coach, a guy named Lloyd Reeb, I said, Lloyd, everybody's kind of gone through this process of not only connecting to your purpose, but then living it out and making changes. What have you noticed? Because he's coached thousands of leaders through this process. Yeah. And I said, he said, there's one thing. It's the ones that took the time to slow down, to understood not only who they were, but who God made them to be, to grow spiritually, to grow relationally, then you can speed up. Because a lot of us in business and life, the pace, like we're in this Mach 5, hyper-caffeinated, crazy world. And so how are we going to ever get different results unless we slow down and say, okay, who am I really and what am I meant to do, and then why is that important? Those aren't just things we can do on the fly. So slowing down does give you the space to be able to speed up, even if it's in little increments, 5-10 minutes a day.
Right. So I know that your dad gave you some advice before you went to the Air Force Academy, and so what was he talked about the ace of the base. Yeah. So I get orders to go to Navy flight school right when Top Gun comes out, and we were told 1 out of every 10,000 people, because it's so popular right now, are going to get to fly a jet, let alone the F-14. Wow. And I'm like kind of freaking out. And my dad pulls me aside and says, listen, John, when you get down there, there's going to be one guy, he's going to be another student. Everybody's talking about him. Go find out him, buy him a beer, ask him what he did. Well, that guy's name was John Foster. And he showed me his how he prepared, how he thought, how he trained. And I followed his advice, and I became number 1 in my class by finding him and then letting him mentor me. What I learned in that is it's so important to go find people that want the results that we have as a father, as a pastor, as a business owner. Look at what they did to get those results. And then we have to make a choice. Am I willing to do what they did to get those results? Then I have to make a commitment that I'm going to do it. Right. And I'm going to share that with people and hold myself accountable. Yeah. So there was a couple things real quick that I want to talk about. The habit loop, I feel like that's part of that too. When you're getting if you want a different result, you have to, once you assess, you've got to be able to make a change in the second step, essentially, so that you can have a different result. Can you talk a little bit about the habit loop and building new habits, and not just, you mentioned the gym, and you were kind of giving that as an example in the book as well. Well, here's another one. Now, think about this, right? There's a cue that happens in our environment. There's a thought that forms. We have a feeling. Out of that feeling, we take an action. Out of that action, there's a consequence. One of the things I worked on and talk about in the book is I had a terrible relationship with my kids, and it was really focused on anger. Anger had become a habit. So I had to change how I thought, which changed my emotions, because I had a pre-experience. What is an amazing, loving relationship with my son? I was able to do that, and today all 3 of my sons are absolutely my best friends. I'll guarantee you there's a text on my phone from one of my boys just asking how today went. That is so great. That's so great. So kind of wrap this up. I know you mentioned towards the end of the book convergence, and maybe just an explanation of what the convergence is, because I think that's really where you kind of put the hustle behind the muscle, so to speak. Oh, big time. So it's remember the 10-10 example? The passions, the values, the strengths, the gifting, all those. Convergence is where all that comes together and starts to build this bridge between purpose and
what we're going to do on a daily basis.
Wow. So
And how to get there.
Yeah,
Build that
exactly.
bridge on from where I want to go on exactly how to get there.
Right. Which is really where, again, I just really appreciate the book because I feel like it really kind of ties back in with just a purpose-driven life. You know, we talk about Rick Warren and some of those other books. I really feel like this book is that on that level of really trying to help you figure out and realize who you are, and then really be able to put the pieces and parts. Because I feel like too, even as Christians, when we know who we are, we're actually a better citizen of earth, and we're better to be able to minister to people and actually fulfill what God's called us to do, not just in our profession, you know, who we are, but really be able to do the things that Christ has called us to do on this earth, and really recognizing who we are as a Christian, that God can be able to work and flow through us. So thank you, John, for writing the book.
Yes, my
thank
pleasure.
Thank you for being on the program.
Thanks for having me.
And it's so great, so great. So thank you.
Yeah.